So starting from the beginning then, one of the clients that I coach helping with their graduate job search, they were quite daunted with they didn't have a LinkedIn profile and they didn't really know where to start. So starting with a blank page, imagine you've got a university student who's still at university. They don't have much work experience. Where would you start with a LinkedIn profile? What would go into it, and how would you want to build it up?
Okay, I mean, it's a fairly simple process actually with LinkedIn now. They've made it quite easy. You literally just sign up with an email address, and then they just start asking you questions. Simple questions like, where do you live? What's your postcode? Where do you work? Which obviously isn't necessarily going to be the case with a graduate, but simple questions that are very easy to answer. And what you're actually doing is you're populating a profile as you do so. But then when you've done that kind of basics, and this is one of the challenges I think with LinkedIn, is that people kind of think that's the job done really. You know, they've created a basic profile just to get on LinkedIn. Their intention wasn't actually to create a profile. They were just answering the questions to get onto LinkedIn. That's a mistake, because when you're using a tool like LinkedIn, you need to understand that it is a two-way street. So even if you're thinking, well, I'm just looking for jobs that I can apply to, I'm just looking for ads on there, so, I don't need to worry about what my profile looks like. Big mistake. As I've already said, LinkedIn's used it as a search tool. And even if you did apply, then what's going to happen, if you haven't got anything in your profile, someone's going to come to your profile and think, that doesn't look very good. So you do need to create a really good profile. You do really need to take a lot of time and attention over making sure that you get it right. I guess that there's sort of four areas that I would say. There's a lot to a profile. In this session, we probably don't have time to go into all of it, but I would say the four things that you really need to think about. Number one, profile picture. Absolutely critical and massively underestimated by a lot of people. This is a professional network, so your photograph needs to be of reasonable quality, headshot only, and only you. So, don't try and be funny. Don't try and be clever. Don't try and be Mr. Smart who's, putting on a funny face or wearing a silly hat or something else. Because it's not funny, frankly. This is your career, and people are going to judge you by this first impression. And if you want to be judged as an idiot, then put an idiotic picture in. But a lot of people do that. A lot of people think they're making some kind of statement about themselves by putting in some stupid picture. Not a good idea. Just keep it simple, a nice, straightforward headshot only, fairly neutral background if you can, obviously up to date and obviously in focus. But, you could talk a lot more about what a profile picture should be. I did an interview recently with a guy who's an expert in the subject, and there's a lot to it, but, keeping it simple, just professional. What you wear isn't as important, actually, because it should be a cropped headshot. So if there's a little bit of what you're wearing showing, that's okay as long as it's something that you would wear in a professional context. Now, not necessarily interview gear. It doesn't have to be like a suit and tie. Depends. If you were going into banking, for instance, then perhaps you would wear a suit and tie. It'd be suitable for the kind of market that you're looking to get into, I guess. So that's profile picture. The second one, which does need a bit of work for most people, is a headline. So if you look at a LinkedIn profile, underneath your name field is something called a headline. And a headline is really important for two reasons. One, when someone first comes across you in a short list of a search, they see your picture. That's what kind of brings them to your profile, really. That's how they notice you. That's why it's very important. But then they look across, and then they're reading this headline. Your name's a bit irrelevant to them at this stage. They're just reading this little bit underneath your name that tells them, are they in the right area? Is this the kind of person that they're looking for? And most people's headlines, by default, will just be your job title and company name if you're in employment. Whatever you put at the top of your experience section will be in your headline. And that isn't a good enough thing to see. As a recruiter, what you want to see is a clear description of exactly who this person is and what they offer you. So you want to craft a headline properly. Now, the kind of things you want in a headline, three things really. First of all, clear description of who you are. Secondly, to include in that keywords, and I'll come back to that in a second. And thirdly, your name. Now, you don't have to put your name in. You've only got 120 characters, so you are a bit restricted in terms of what you can get into this field. But I would suggest that a name could be a useful thing to do. And the reason for that is this. If you look on LinkedIn, you do a keyword search on LinkedIn, which, let's face it, if someone knows you by a name, then that's a different thing altogether. But if they're searching by keywords, so they're looking for a certain type of person, and then of course what's going to happen is that they're going to potentially see you outside of their network. Depends how large your network is and how large their network is. But if you don't fall within 3 levels of them, i.e., if you're a connection, that's fine. If you're a connection of one of their connections, i.e. a second tier, that's also fine. They'll see your full profile. If you're a third tier connection, these days, that's also fine as well. But if you're beyond that, then they won't see your name. What will happen is the search company will just say LinkedIn member. Now, a lot of recruiters will know clever ways of getting around that, but you don't want to rely on that. If they can see your name in your headline, you always see a headline, by the way, then all they need to do is search for you by name. And then when they do, they can then see your full profile. So all that hard work you do creating a great profile, the problem with all of that is that having done it, you then nobody sees it, or a lot of people aren't going to see it if you don't make yourself visible by putting your name in your headline. Now, keywords are also very important in this field. What you tend to find is that keywords are important throughout a profile, but that particularly in a headline. It's a very keyword-sensitive field, so words that are in a headline will show great preference in a search for those particular keywords. You're more likely to come higher up in a search if you get those really important keywords. You're not going to fit too many. I usually say if you can get 3 to 5 in, you're doing all right. If you can get 5 to 7 in, then you're doing really well. Obviously, it depends on the words and how many characters there are in those words, given that you've got restricted characters, but try and craft a really good headline. Always do it don't do it on LinkedIn. Do it somewhere else like Word or something like that, so that you can play around with it, get it right, try different words, count your characters, spell check it, all the rest of it. Then when you've got it, and you want to be pretty close to your 120 character max, when you've got it right, and just copy and paste it and put it into the LinkedIn field when in edit mode on your profile.
Nice. So just sticking then with the headline, what would an example be then for take myself, so say I was a graduate, so would it be James Curran, business graduate looking for roles in, say, consulting or accounting? Would that be the sort of thing, or would it be more specific or more general than that?
What you would want to do is think in terms of if you're a recruiter. So imagine the job that you really want, right? Now, this is quite an easy exercise to do, and it's worth doing, is do a search anywhere, not just on LinkedIn, for the kind of jobs you'd be interested in. Then look at the copy of those jobs and pick out the keywords for those jobs that you would be interested in and suitable for, that they are using in those jobs, right? Now, then you want to make sure that those words are included in your headline, or certainly within your profile, and ideally within your headline if possible. So, they may be, they have to be true, but when I say true, it could be something that you've studied as part of your degree. You're not necessarily saying that you have lots of experience in X, whatever that might be, but you have some knowledge of it, and so there's no harm, therefore, in putting it in your headline. Now, when somebody's searching, especially at graduate level, they're not necessarily expecting you to have a lot of experience, but they want to understand that there's some level of applicability. So they're putting in keywords, and you may well and more likely to come up high in that search result if you've got those keywords in your headline. So you have to do your research on keywords. There's also tools you can use. There's a tool on Google AdWords that you can use, or actually quicker than that, because you have to create a Google AdWords account to use that tool. You can use a keywordtool.io is a useful site to use. And what you basically do is you start with a couple of keywords that you're fairly confident are applicable, put those into a search in there, and it will suggest loads of other words that are regularly being searched on that are applicable to the words that you've already put in. So that might give you some more ideas. I always say to people, try and come up with a top 10 in order as well. So, 1 to 10, these are my most important keywords. And if you can get, as I say, 5 to 7 into your headline, that'd be amazing. 3 to 5 minimum.
Okay, no, that's it's not one that I've thought about before, and it's not one that I've used in that way either.
It's worth also saying, James, at this point, that because it wouldn't be right if I didn't say this really, that the most keyword sensitive field in your whole profile is your name. It's also the most keyword sensitive in terms of things outside LinkedIn. So Google search. If you Google search or do a Google search and you find a LinkedIn profile, it's almost always because there's something in the name field that you're searching for. And so you will find a lot of people on LinkedIn are starting to put keywords in their name field. I'm not a fan of it. It is against the rules. LinkedIn state pretty clearly in their terms of use, the user agreement they call it, which we all agree to when you sign up for an account, that you should not include anything in a field for which it's not meant. And clearly keywords are not meant to be in a named field, yeah? That's a pretty obvious, blatant breaking of the rules. Now, I'm not saying that we always have to, follow LinkedIn's rules because they can make up whatever rules they like. And, why do we have to follow them? But I think if you're being smart about it, you wouldn't put keywords in your name field, because LinkedIn can be quite crafty about this. They don't ban you or anything like that. They used to do that. They don't suspend your account because you've done something wrong. What they do is they change the algorithm. So they haven't at the moment, but which I'll come back to in a second. But all they need to do is say, right, if we see other words that clearly aren't a name, and I assume there's a way of building that kind of intelligence into their search algorithm, then what we'll do is we'll penalise those people. And we'll put them right at the bottom of a search result. And you won't even know that it's happening. You just suddenly find that you're not getting any calls anymore. So I think it's a dangerous thing to do. But at the moment, and this is why I'm telling people this, is at the moment I have to say that isn't the case. And, if you do a search on, I don't know, whatever you want to do a search, do it on Google, do it on LinkedIn, you'll find the top results of people that have put that keyword in their name field. So at the moment, that technique, I have to say, it does work, but I think it's dangerous going forward.
So we covered two there, so picture and headline, and you mentioned there were 4.
Yeah. So the next one would be summary. Now, the summary is an interesting field because it's just a free text entry. It's not, specifically asking you for anything, really. It's just saying, give us a summary of who you are. It's a real opportunity for you to say something about yourself. And I know you recently interviewed Jennifer Holloway, didn't you, on personal branding?
Yep, episode 12.
Okay. Well, I refer to episode 12 because I'm sure she would have covered the kind of stuff that's important in your summary. She may not have referred to it as being a LinkedIn summary, but the kind of stuff that Jennifer talks about is key to your LinkedIn summary. What you're trying to do in here is explain yourself, introduce yourself in a way that shows you as being a very authentic, real person. And it's very important. People do pay attention to this. Not at search stage. Don't get me wrong. A recruiter doing a search is not going to read your summary. They're not interested. They're interested in whether you fit the keywords. But where this comes into play is where you're lucky enough to get an interview. And that, you turn up to the interview and, you're nervous and you sit in reception for 10 minutes twiddling your thumbs thinking, how's this going to go? What are they going to ask me, etc., etc. Well, in that 10 minutes that you're doing that, guess what they're doing? They're sitting there reading your LinkedIn profile. I guarantee it. They just almost every time someone's going to do that. Now, when they read your LinkedIn profile, they're now skipping the keywords. They're not interested you've got that far. They're okay with that. They know that you're obviously suitable to some degree. They're now interested in who you are and what kind of questions they're going to ask you. And that's when they start reading your summary. And so it's a massive opportunity for you to set the scene, really, create the situation that you want it to be. And it's very much your opportunity to create a really good first impression because they're about to meet you. When the door opens and you walk into that interview room, are they thinking to themselves, great, can't wait? Or are they thinking to themselves, how long can I make this one last? And I do honestly think it makes a big impact. So a summary needs to be an introduction to yourself. If you want a bit of structure to that, Jennifer talks about this in a bit more detail than I would, but I always say to people, a brief structure would be break it down into 4 areas, really. Firstly, just say hello. So it's kind of, this is who I am. And then secondly, say, this is why I want to do what I want to do, right? You just talk about why you're really interested in your subject. Make sure that comes across because nobody wants to employ you to do something if you're only doing it as a job. Nobody's interested in that. They want to know that you've got real energy, passion, and you really want to get involved in this, And that must come across in that section. That's your chance in the summary section to do it. Then the third bit is kind of, this is what I want to do. So, this is me. Hello. This is what I'm all about. And then, the kind of factual stuff is the what. So I'm looking for roles in A, B, C, and D. So, you only say a lot there, but just keep that pretty factual. The fourth thing is actually kind of the first in a way, in that it's different in that it goes right at the top of your summary, but you put contact details right at the top of your summary. And the reason for that is that a lot of people will view a profile through a mobile app these days. And when you view a profile via mobile, and you look at the summary section, you only see the first line, and you want that bit to be the bit that says, this is how you can get in touch with me. To make it easy for people to get in touch, so you put your email address right at the top of the summary there. That can be quite a useful technique.
So we've got picture, headline, and summary as the three. What would you recommend as a fourth tip?
Okay, so the fourth one would be to make sure that you put something within your experience section. Now, it's difficult as a graduate, I know, but people are looking for some relevant experience, internship experience, or even holiday work experience. Now, if you haven't got any, okay, you haven't got any. And obviously, you can't change that now. But clearly, if you're thinking seriously about your career, you should have got some work experience. Make sure that it is in there, because they are always looking for that. They're always looking for some demonstration that you've shown that you know what it's like to turn up for work. Right? And honestly, it almost doesn't matter. Obviously, if it's relevant, then better. But it almost doesn't matter. They need to know, and it's really a concern to people, because I've been there. I've recruited graduates who have not got the first idea what it's like to turn up to work. And I'm like, do I really have to tell you and train you what it's like to turn up to work every day? Well, that is a concern to people. And if you have done that and have experience of showing that you consistently are able to turn up and deliver in whatever the job is, then that matters. And you might not think it does, but to employers it does matter, and they want to see it. It also gives them more to ask you. Is that one of the hardest things about graduate recruitment is, well, what do I ask you? I mean, you haven't done anything. So, if I'm interviewing someone who's got 20 years experience, I've got loads of material to interrogate. But with you, I've got nothing to interrogate. And that's not good for the interviewer, and therefore it's not good for you. So, give them something to ask you. Give them something that they can really start digging into to be able to then show your qualities as someone that they want to employ.
Brilliant advice there. And just go back to your very first point about the picture. So when I spoke with Jennifer Holloway in episode 12, her website recommendation was a website called Photofeeler, where you can put a picture onto this website and people will rate your picture in terms of how professional you look, how likable you look, how influential.
Yeah.
It's a good way to be able to find a LinkedIn picture that ticks all those boxes. Because as you mentioned, I'm amazed when I see even recruitment professionals and the pictures, like them taken in the pub with two people next to them who've been chopped off, and you think, oh, you must be able to find a better picture than that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not a bad site, that. All I would say to people about it, you need a bit of a thick skin if you're going to use that site.
Okay.
You're asking a question, you're going to get an answer. And obviously, if you put a really ridiculous picture in there, then, but you're probably not going to use that site unless you put a fairly decent picture in. And but then you're going to get people coming back with feedback that you might find you don't like. What I would say is that it's not a bad thing to do, and certainly if you've got a thick skin, easy for me to say, then do it. But at the most, let's not get too carried away. I always say to people with regards to profile pictures, look, I could talk for an hour about what profile pictures would be, but if I did that, that's going to put you off. You're going to start thinking, gosh, there's a mountain to climb. There's all this stuff I need to know. Look, it just needs to be a close-up headshot, right? Close-up headshot of you looking professional, right? Let's not overcomplicate it, because I find a lot of people don't put a profile picture in because they're so hung up with it being that it had to be so amazing. And it doesn't have to be absolutely amazing. Obviously the better, great, but it doesn't have to be. It just needs to be, current, so I can recognise you, close-up headshot, in focus, and that's fine to start. Well, my profile picture for years was taken by my 8-year-old daughter. But it was all right, it was fine. I've got a more professional one now, but, it's not, it's important. Don't get me wrong, it's a very important part of a profile, but if people are not putting something in there because they're so worried that it has to be X, Y, and Z, it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be good, yeah? So that would be my advice on the profile picture.